Awesome. All right. Well, guess what? Here we are again, looking at where faith intersects life. And today we've got a special guest. We've got Chris Bob. He's a communications manager for Epoch Times, and he's also a host and reporter for NTD TV. I'm excited to have him on today. Him and I met back in February 23, at the Asbury Revival, where I really began to realize something was happening in Gen Z in our nation. Chris, thanks so much for being on here today.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Pastor. Happy to be on.
Yeah. So, you and I met in a unique circumstance there. I think, particularly in your world, in the news world, you are already probably following and watching what was happening with the younger generation. But for me and many in the church world, until we saw that revival at Asbury, we didn't realize something was happening with Gen Z. How long have you been tracking this? What's been going on with Gen Z?
I could say I've been tracking this for 24 years because I'm in Gen Z.
You,
I
you
was
are
born in the
Gen
year
Z.
2000. So I am Gen Z. So I've lived it. Not only have I've been studying it and reporting on it, but I have a lived experience. I can tell you a little bit about my experience, what got me involved in news and to see what's going on. Uh,
Absolutely.
in high school, I went to a Catholic high school, so it was a little different than going to public school. But I had grown up in public school from elementary to middle. Um, we know that there are ideological differences in academia, but what's understressed is kind of what gets people there. When you're in college, it's easy to say, "Oh, my son's leftist professor brainwashed them," or "My daughter's leftist professor brainwashed them." But I think a lot of this stuff begins early on in education. What people are exposed to at a young age, it kind of forms them in what their values are and what they look to. And then in college, they kind of get their little certificate. They get their nod. Oh, yes, we can say it more openly now that your parents are away from you. You don't have to go home to them. This is how you should think. So I was exposed to that a little bit in high school, not as much because I was in a kind of a school with values, a religious school. But in college, I was really shocked when I got there. The first day that I went to my undergrad, I was brought into the campus chapel and we were given a speech. They had someone from a major news outlet come and talk to us. And he basically said, if you don't believe that Donald Trump is a racist, if you don't believe that, there are a plethora of genders, if you don't believe this, this, and this, you shouldn't be here. This isn't a place for
Wow.
you. Shortly after that pep talk, we were greeted by a performing arts group who reenacted intercourse and encouraged us to get sexually active in the college community. So a
Wow.
lot of things are happening on our college campuses that are unsettling that probably you didn't expect, you didn't experience in your generation, and people who are older aren't really sure of what's going on because there isn't a lot of communication going on between parents and their kids on college campuses.
Yeah, yeah. Wait a minute. We got to back up here. So you you just exposed every parent's worst nightmare
Yeah.
to be reality. All right.
Mhm.
So I had heard an analysis saying that the current woke ideology, whatever we really want to, however you want to term it, progressivism, that it is a kind of mirror form of religion. And so it sounds like you walked in and they gave you this kind of theological
It was
litmus
in a
test.
chapel.
You
Yeah,
have to believe this, and now you have to enter into our ritual life if you're going to be one of us.
correct. Yeah, that's what it felt like. It felt like some type of ceremony, like I'm being, go. It's a liminal experience. You're going through the threshold of, your family life, and you're joining us now.
Right.
That's exactly what it felt like. Yeah.
Wow, wow, wow. Okay, so did you consider yourself conservative? How did you view yourself as a young man? You probably weren't really sure where you fell on a spectrum yet, or maybe you did. How did you consider yourself when you got there?
I was interested in politics. I knew I was going to study political science.
Mhm.
I'm not totally ideologically driven. It was much more values based for me. Like I
Mm-hmm.
believed in certain things, like You know, I didn't believe in a lot of the things that they taught me, but I was interested in it because my family came from, some of them came from the former Soviet Union, and they
Wow.
experienced what life was like under communism. And I wanted to pursue a degree where I could study communism and its effect on politics and religion. That was my whole focus. And I chose the school that I went to because a lot of the political science department there was staffed by people who were Marxist academics. They
Hmm.
published in communist journals. So I was interested in that because in the time I went to college and in high school, like 2016 through 2018, democratic socialism became really popular for people in my generation.
Hmm.
The return to like communism, that became kind of a hot button issue for people in my
Sure.
generation. So I was really interested in studying that. And I came from the perspective of I'm politically involved because people in my family suffered so much under this system. And I'm really interested in how it's being repackaged and sold to my generation. And what I
Yeah.
found was that a lot of people in my generation have bought it, unfortunately. And I spent a lot of time debating people in my own class more so than I did my professors.
Well, so before we
I,
move on to that point, I want to hover here just for a moment. So because I've noticed it too, we all kind of notice it that Marxism, more specifically, I'd say kind of a socialism light, is an easy sell to every generation for some reason. So why do you believe that it was so resurgent in Gen Z? What was driving that?
Well, you look at the candidates that were popular around that time. You know, like Bernie Sanders, for example,
Hmm.
AOC. They're in the news right now because maybe AOC is going to take Schumer's spot. We don't know
Right.
yet, but but the values, and if you even look right now, New York City, second candidate polling after Cuomo is a Democratic socialist. If you look at what they're speaking to, it strikes a chord with people in my generation. Uh, Young men, they're getting educated, but they can't find jobs. The ability to get a home, to get a high-paying job, feels out of grasp for people in my
Yeah.
generation. I mean, you go for a salad during lunch and you're spending $20. People are not people are making that in an hour. I mean,
Mm.
it's a problem. It's a
Yeah.
very big problem. So they feel like there's no hope, and they're listening to people who are providing them solutions. We're going to
Some
take
sort of
people's
hope,
money.
even if it's a
Yeah,
false
we're
hope.
gonna we're
Yeah.
gonna
Yeah.
take people's money. Whether or not it works isn't really the problem. They're just looking
Right.
for a fix. You know, they're looking for a good salesman to sell them on something. And that's another
Right.
thing that people in my generation are being influenced by. If we talk about sales and what is inspiring people, people in my generation are addicted to social media. This is not a news report. This is reality. I mean, this is everyone
Right.
knows this. What do young men see on social media? Well, the top trends are influencers, kind of in sales, trying to show young men that they can get this much level of enjoyment, this much
Hmm.
level of wealth if they follow their regimen, if they buy
Right.
into their course. They show off a life which the majority of people do not have, and they tell them that that's attainable. The side effect of that is that it makes a lot of young people who experience this content. I'm talking about people like Andrew Tate or, even
Absolutely.
Grant Cardone on some days.
Hmm.
The side effect of that is it makes people in my generation feel like they already failed if
Hmm.
they're not super successful like them. And if they do go down that route where they try to pursue the things that they're being influenced by, the courses that they're being told to sign up for, the meetings they're being told to attend, uh, they're not going to get any better for it.
Right.
And
Right.
that depresses the heck out of them too. So we're seeing young men being addicted to social media, having no hope for the future, and then being left with a lot of depression. And that's why we see like the suicide rate for young men has jumped about 30%
Hmm.
in this decade as opposed to the last.
It's an epidemic. So something you said there took me back to an early interview that Joe Rogan had with Jordan Peterson. And Jordan Peterson began to break down for Joe Rogan what happens societally when your economy becomes stratified, right? And under Obama, this I think would be a shock to many people that the wealth distribution got the worst that it had been in the United States since the 1890s. That we were seeing the wealth all accumulating at the top. And then Trump comes in for one little window of hope where we saw real incomes increase, home ownership increase for those 4 years. And then, of course, COVID, and then Biden administration. And we saw it again, the wealth stratification. So the very people that claim they're going to give you this better distribution of wealth, the outcomes are the exact opposite of what they promised these young people. Let me remember how Jordan said it. He told Rogan, he said if you get people stacking up at the bottom and they see no way out, he said that is the seeds of revolution and destruction. And I think you're nailing it why young people feel alienated because they see no hope for, the classic two kids in a two-car garage and a white picket fence, right? That American dream seems far out of reach for them.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned President Trump. I mean, I recall one of his first speeches where he basically outlined that the American dream is dead, and
Yes.
that struck a chord with young men. I'll tell you that because I mean, I have hope, but if I feel like if I wasn't a person of faith, I would believe that fully.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because it just seems like you look at what we're exposed to online,
Yes.
that we're basically we don't really have a future. Many people in my generation, actually, there was a recent poll that came out. We touched upon it in an interview I did that I know you watched with
Mm.
Braden Sorbo and Hannah
I'm
Faulkner
going to
on
link that here in the
NBC.
description.
Yeah, please do, please do. My generation, Gen Z, is one of the most indebted generations already from the get-go. So we're
Yep.
already accumulating debt. So things are looking very grim for us. So yeah, people turn to revolutionary ideologies not when the hope is good and they have prospects for the future, but when they're really down low, but
Sure.
they don't really know what you're going to get out of that.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you said when you were leaving high school, when you were in high school and you were leaving high school, that you weren't really politically or ideologically driven, you were morally driven.
Yes,
And so
yeah.
this is really where our relationship first connected. You were out there interviewing people for the Asbury revival. I was out there with my son, and I was actually walking around with my little phone interviewing people. And I saw you and another gentleman, probably about 300 yards away, walking across the campus property. And like this voice inside said, I would attribute it to the Holy Spirit of God, said, go over and interview those young men. Y'all were in some really nice trench coats, looked super sharp. And I figured y'all were campus leaders or that you were part of the faculty or something. And I got over there and I was really asking you what you were observing, right? And I remember both y'all saying that you hadn't really been able to unpack it yet. You weren't sure what you were seeing here with these thousands. I just looked up the numbers. It was an average of 15,000 people a day gathering on that campus to worship, right? 200 other campuses around the United States joining together with them at the same time. And so um, I really, I believe that the answer right now is simplicity, moral simplicity, a simple life, right? That there was this idea back in the 50s, 60s that a young man that there was what we call the starter home, right? There was an idea, and you touched on how Tate and them are selling the opposite of this, but somehow we've got to sell the idea that you can start in a 1,200 square foot home and start a family and get a job, and then there's a place you can go next and a place you can go next. Like we have to build again this dream that life can get better, that there's a place you can start, there's a starting line, and there's a place you can grow to and develop and have a family and a life. And these are simplistic ideas. These are very anachronistic or old fashioned or whatever. But I think it is the answer for Gen Z, that if we can convince them that you don't need a Manhattan apartment right out of college, right? You can
Well, I
you can
mean,
have that little home.
they're being sold delusions of grandeur.
Yes.
That that's really that's what it is, and it's an easy sell because you know you want things to be great.
Yeah.
You want to be a high roller when you first come out of college, and you want to get people. I talked to some people here who do interviews in New York City for job candidates,
Hmm.
and one of the interesting things they tell me about Gen Z was actually two. Some people come on with their parents to do the interview
Hmm.
because they want them to speak to their character. That's a little off-putting for some of the people in the
Yeah.
human resources. So they're kind of being enabled and handheld.
Right. This is my mommy.
Yeah, this is my mommy, and she's going to tell you how good I am.
Yeah.
And the other things is they're applying to positions where you need 10, 15 years of work experience and leadership. Um,
Bingo.
I think they deserve those positions from the get go. They want to be in the C suite
Yeah.
at a college with a degree.
Yeah.
And I think, yeah, simplicity is very good. If you can find a way to package that and to sell it to people, and I know you can, I mean, that will give people peace
Sure.
because what they have right now online is chaos. I mean, it just
Yes.
leads to depression and to anxiety. That's why we see people in my generation are on SSRIs, a lot of issue.
Hmm.
Anxiety is the number one health concern for people in
Yeah.
my
Gen
generation.
Z has the highest levels
The
by
highest levels of
far
anxiety. Yes,
of
yeah.
hopelessness and
And
anxiety.
and why do you think we're being shown all of this stuff? We're being told that, oh, I'm doing it, you can too.
Right.
Maybe you can't. Maybe it's just the pomp and circumstance to get you to buy their product. They're being shown all that stuff, and then when they can't get it, they're getting really bummed out.
Well, yeah, and they can
Yeah,
scroll
I
it,
mean,
right? They could just go,
yeah,
look,
it's just
look,
very
look, look.
easy.
I mean,
And
yeah.
not only that, but that's economics, right? But then there's also
Hmm.
like family life that you touched upon with getting a
Right.
starter home and getting married, and you know that's great. One of the key steps to stay out of poverty is uh, getting married before you have children, getting a job, and
Yeah.
getting at least a high school degree. But when you
Exactly.
talk about family life, how are people meeting each other? In my generation, people are meeting each other on dating apps.
Right.
Um, they're meeting each other on Tinder, on Hinge, on
Hookup.
Bumble, hookup apps, really.
Mhm.
And you
Yep.
could put so some of them are a little bit different. Tinder is the people consider that to be a hookup app. You go
Right.
on there and you're looking for someone. There was some recent research that I was reading. It was really interesting. I wanted to include that in the show. We just didn't have enough time.
Mhm.
That the I believe it's the top 1% of men on those apps are getting like 90% of the women on there. They're
Wow.
connecting with you. Yeah. So that's depressing a lot of other people. So
Yeah.
people are scrolling. They're not finding people. Some of the other apps like Hinge, they're more demographic. That you can list out what your height is, what your political views are, and people are going for that. But by and large, these apps are taking away interactions from people,
Right.
in-person interactions where they can go and meet someone either in work or, out with their friends in a park or in a bar or something like that. Those
Yep.
interactions aren't happening. They're being replaced by finding attractive people online, swiping, trying to hook up with them, seeing if that
Right.
works. What it's actually doing is it's getting a lot of people into premarital relations, causing a lot of unwanted pregnancies early
Right.
on. A lot
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
mistakes are happening, and that's just spiraling right now. People can't
Sure.
find a long-term steady partner. They can't
Well,
find a
and
lot of
there's a divergence here too that we're seeing in all the polling between men and women. So as
yes.
Gen Z men are becoming more and more and more conservative by large, by far, every group, every racial group, every demographic of male and Gen Z is becoming more conservative. But the women are going the exact opposite direction. Now, in Christianity, we're seeing a move called trad wife, traditional wife, where young ladies are saying, no, no, we're rejecting all this that you're selling us in society, and we want a family, we want a home. But the truth is, what we're seeing is this huge divergence between men and women. What are you seeing? Are you seeing that? And how are we going to overcome that if you've got men wanting to be more conservative and ladies are going, we're more progressive and more out there than ever?
Yeah. So some of the progressive issues that I think are attracting a lot of young women, from what I've seen, is abortion is number one. I think that is really hitting the nail on the head, uh, and that comes because I think women in my generation are becoming more sexualized through the dating apps, um, and that goes for men too. So if they have any things like that, they're being pushed to do that. In college, there's a lot of people in the faculty who are pushing civic engagement. During the election, I was in Michigan covering the race. I was looking at the Senate race there with Slotkin, as well as the general election, Trump or
Hmm.
Kamala. Um, there was really interesting things going on. So for the first time, they had polling sites on the university campus in a number of universities. So I was at Michigan State University. There was also one at the University of Michigan. And you have groups on campus basically pushing and incentivizing all of the young people on the campus to go out and vote, basically making it a requirement for them to get involved. And I think what they thought, because I interviewed some of the people and off the camera, things they were pretty far to the left. They thought that if they did that, they would see a lot of people giving their support to Kamala Harris or to the Democrats,
Right.
for example. Uh, what it turned out to be is a lot of young men went for Trump there, and they were encouraged, even though they were low propensity voters, to support Donald Trump. And I think some of the key issues that are igniting young men to do that are the issues we just talked about: the ability to own a home, uh, what's going on socially and spiritually and sexually with a plethora of different genders. Young men don't have a lobbying group in America for the most part.
Hmm.
I mean, if you look at the
It's a good point.
Democratic platform, you see that there's a lot of attention focused on women, on minorities, and there hasn't been historically in this country. So they're doing something there, but there's no one bowling for the young men there. If you look at the
Hmm.
right side, you mentioned Joe Rogan. I believe 70% of his audience, the median demographic is like a 24-year-old man,
That's right.
someone like me. So they're connecting. They're connecting with those people. Joe Rogan is further on the right. Jordan Peterson is touching on young men. They're getting people there. Politically, the outreach to young men is on the right. I haven't seen much Democratic outreach. You can even look at Turning Point USA, Charlie Kirk. So it's
Yes.
all going for young men. There is an outreach. So if you're presented with one side, which basically says that you have a problem, you have toxic masculinity. That's a term that I was taught on college. That men by their actions can be toxic. Um,
Yeah.
Toxifying masculinity, making masculinity a bad thing, making being a man a bad thing, uh, presenting men as rapists, presenting men as deviants, as abusers, all these different things. Uh, you're not going to get a base if you have one side where you're calling men that, and you have another side where they're saying, "Oh, young men, come to us, please. You're invited. Come on in." You're gonna get a shift there. You're gonna get people, young men, going to the right. That's primarily what I think it is. I think there's no real outreach from the Democrats to young men.
Yeah, it makes absolute sense. So, you're making me think of the historic Christian definition of manhood that was codified back in 1047 in the chivalric code, what we call chivalry. And when I was a young man, the Bugs Bunny cartoons, Bugs Bunny would often have this line where he'd say, "Chivalry is not dead," where he would lay down his coat for a woman to walk over a mud puddle or do some thing of that nature. Yeah, so there's something within the God-given creation of man, men specifically, gender, not mankind, where men want to create, build, and protect. And if you remove that from them, and I would say if you vilify any group long enough, that group's going to drift somewhere because you just can't vilify people for so long before you get a backlash. But when you vilify the very creative thing that's in someone, their innate instinct to build, to create, to protect, to rescue, and that's what was happening with this whole toxic masculinity move. They were attacking the very God created maleness that's in us, right? Uh, and so I forgot how it was put, but when you think about who builds your roads, who puts up your power lines, who builds your skyscrapers, right? 98% men. So there's this silent kind of creative beauty and manhood. They don't get patted on the back. They take their little lunchbox. They go to the shipyard and build the ships. They go wherever. But that's part of manhood. They don't want to be celebrated for it, but they don't want to be vilified for it either.
Mhm. Definitely, definitely, and I think that's why you're seeing the shift. Another thing, if you go back to social media, I don't know how familiar you are with this, but there's a high prevalence of pornography too being shown to men and
Hmm.
and women. And one of the get rich quick schemes for women is to post content of themselves online
Is
and
that
get
the
paid.
OnlyFans thing?
OnlyFans, yes, this is
Okay.
this is huge, being advertised to young women.
Wow.
Basically, the idea is you set up an account, you post all sorts of pictures of your body, and you'll get needy men, maybe the not the top 1% on Tinder, the people who can't connect with women, and they will
Hmm.
begin paying for that, and they're making some women rich. I think like the one of the highest earners that I saw, there was a young rap star called Bad Baby, and she's probably my age. She got her career kicked off when she went on Dr. Phil. Her name is Danielle Bergoli. Um, she was the Catch Me Outside girl. I don't know if you remember her. She went on
Oh,
Dr.
yes,
Phil.
yes,
She had
yeah.
a feud with her mother, and she threatened Dr. Phil. And then after that, she became famous. She started a rap career, and then she went on OnlyFans. I think she made $57 million on the platform.
Get out of here.
Yeah. So if you think about what young men are being told to do to get wealth, they need to be buying all these courses or investing in strange cryptocurrencies, or speculating on this or that, or buying some type of non fungible token NFT. Women are being told to use their bodies, their sexual images of their bodies, to form their wealth. And
Yeah.
it's really, that's an epidemic in young women too. It's happening on every college campus. There are women doing that. Every college campus in the United States, there are women selling that and promoting that.
Yeah, I think we're surprised sometimes. I mean, I'm thinking all the way back to when Katy Perry showed up on Got Talent or whatever it was, and here's a young lady who had spent her whole life in a Christian home, singing in church, and all of a sudden the limelight and everything, and she just walks away from that life and begins to sell young girls a completely different view of life, right? So the the scripture talks about soul ties tied to sex. I was actually just talking to a young couple about this recently, and they're in their 20s and they're not married and trying to navigate relationship and life, and I was telling them that you got to understand that sex is spiritual, and I think this is why it's used so much for destructive purposes because sex between man and woman is designed to bind a relationship, to bind your souls together, to create that longevity, right? And sex is a beautiful and good thing, but if you can manipulate it and twist it, then you can create some destructive forces here, and we'll certainly see that. and you're making me think, and you probably remember this. In 1959, there was a Communist Manifesto that got exposed, and Paul Harvey famously made a radio kind of monologue about it. But what it was talking about, how to unravel American society. And the first was to separate people from the church. The next was to promote homosexuality. And the third was to destroy the traditional marriage. And as if by magic, everything that the Soviet Union was trying to do to American society back in the 50s and 60s seems to have come to pass in the 2000s.
Hmm. Yeah. If you look at a lot of Marxist organizations operating in the United States right now, like Black Lives Matter, for example,
Yes.
they take all of that to heart. And it's a very unfortunate thing that an advocacy group, an alleged advocacy group, who is trying to uplift and say that some person's life matters, which is of course a noble thing, is being led by frauds and hucksters and people who are pushing destructive ideologies.
Right.
In their charter, they're talking about the destruction of the nuclear family. That's when
Yes.
you know. I mean, that goes back to Marx. They also are anti-religion. That goes back to Marx.
All of it
And
tied right
his
back
whole
to
thing,
Marxism. Yeah.
religion is basically a distraction, which gives people something to hope for, but they're
The
not
opiate
seeing
of
how
the
they're killing people.
masses.
Yes, it's an opiate of the masses. They're being repressed and oppressed by religion, and they're being forced into complacency. That was his thesis. But
Yeah.
yeah, people in my generation, you're seeing some people being pushed. By and large, America is going more towards atheism, or none, they call it, like
Hmm.
no individual faith or denomination that you classify yourself with. But you're also seeing a light in my generation is some people joining like this trad movement, and you're
Hmm.
seeing it like in Catholicism, for example. You're seeing a lot of young men not going to regular Sunday mass, but going to like Latin mass, like really
Right.
going back to traditional expressions of Christian worship, going back to communities where they're looking for something in the past that we once had, but it feels like everything is lost. So they're trying to revive that. And
Right.
there's a lot of young men, conservative Catholic influencers, right? Like Braden Sorpo, for example, is
Hmm.
becoming a Roman Catholic, and
Right.
he's pushing that stuff too. And coupled with that, you're also seeing, you know this more than anyone, a collapse of mainline Protestantism in America.
Hmm.
Uh, Churches like the Episcopal Church, um, Evangelical Lutheran
United
Church,
Methodists. Yeah.
United Methodist Church, their church is imploding right now. You have the conservative
Yes.
wing and the more liberal faction, Presbyterian Church, PCUSA. A lot of these denominations are they can barely get 8 people in a room. I mean,
Right.
you know,
Right. It's true. Yeah.
they can barely form a quorum of the apostles,
Yeah.
uh, and they used to pack the pews 40 years ago, and you wonder what happened. You know,
Right.
why is this happening? Is it just that we went from 1950 as a number to 2024 and 5 as a number? It's not, oh, we're living in this present year, that's why religion is going away. There's a reason why that's happening. And I think from my research of it, if you look at the theology and the social movements that they're pushing, they're leading to the destruction of their very own denomination. I think you're more likely right now to see a pride flag outside of an Episcopal church than you are a cross. Um,
Yes. Yeah. Well, I
you
can
know,
look. I can offer you a real time example of that. I got
yeah,
invited to preach at an Episcopal church. The priest who was leading that congregation, the young lady reached out to me through a common friend, who was a relative of mine, and said, "Hey, we'd love to have you come speak." They heard that I was doing some work with prisoners, that I was doing some work with people coming out of prison, helping people get rights
sure,
restored, different things like that. So they were seeing an ally to a degree, and invited me in to come preach at this Episcopal church, which is I considered an honor because they don't really extend their hand to Protestants, evangelicals, and Pentecostals in particular. I'm with the Assemblies of God. And so when I got there, the young lady said something very telling, striking. It was a question kind of comment. She said, "Why are mean churches like yours growing when, justice-seeking churches like mine are dying?" And I thought, "Oh, wow, she sees it. She might have a wrong opinion of what's going on, but she sees what's going on." And I said, "Ma'am," I said, you're asking the absolutely right question." And I said, "Let me tell you what's happening." I said, "You are offering food to the hungry. You're saying to people who are alcoholics or living in other destructive lifestyles that you're going to accept them the way they are and love them." And I said, "There's a place for that in the gospel for sure." I said, "But ultimately, the gospel of Jesus Christ is a message of transformation. It says to the alcoholic, 'I forgive you and I'll set you free from alcoholism.' It says to the fornicator, to the promiscuous person, 'I'll forgive you for that and I'll set you free from that.'" And I said, "You guys have forgotten that when you feed someone real food, what they need is the spiritual food of deliverance." I said, "So what you're doing is you're feeding them for today, but offering them no hope for the future." And I said, the gospel ultimately is a message of deliverance, salvation, and hope for your future. And if you don't start preaching the gospel in its plain simplicity, your denominations are going to cease to exist in a couple of decades. Yeah, you nailed
I
it.
think
You're right.
I think demographically, if you look at the attendance of these congregations, it's like it's an angle going down, and
Mm,
it's unfortunate because they occupy so many. In every town, you'll find multiple of these
yes.
mainline Protestant denominations.
Yeah.
One of the formerly biggest, the United Church of Christ. I mean, they were literally if you go back in time, these were the Puritans. These were the
Yes.
most zealous,
Yes.
Calvinists out there who were very strict, and we've all read the Scarlet Letter. We know what they were like,
That's
but
right. Yeah.
but
And they
but now they
exploded
have.
during when Whitfield had that
Yes, yeah, the
first Great
second Great Awakening,
Awakening. You
first and
saw
second
this
Great Awakening.
explosion
Yeah,
of
yeah,
Calvinistic thought, which I believe really
yes,
is the foundation and principles of our founding fathers. They understood sin
hmm,
nature. They understood why we needed a separation of power, right? Because humans couldn't be trusted with
hmm.
power over other human beings. But then in the second Great Awakening, the United Church of Christ just exploded all across America as this powerful force for the kingdom of God, and now they're cease to exist.
Yeah. Basically ceased to exist. I mean, they have part of their platform is now that almost every congregation is open and affirming, and
Right.
that applies to. I don't know if you know much about that. It's basically like
Oh
your
yeah.
gender identity and that sort of thing. So basically, just
Yes.
like you said, how you're not going to be transformed, you're just going to come as you are, and we're going to accept you as you are, and then that's
Stay
the
as
way
you
you'll
are.
stay as you are. Yeah. So
Yeah.
that's just one way to do theology, but I don't know. I can't speak on this because this is not my specialty, but it just doesn't seem to be working if you
Well,
look at
it's
what's going
antithetical to the gospel,
on.
right?
Yeah.
The whole gospel. Jesus says to the young lady caught in adultery, openly in adultery, and the whole community wants to stone her, right? And famously, he says to the rest of them, "Okay, well, you that have no sin, cast the first stone at her." So he offers her forgiveness. He says to her, she says, "Master, do you not condemn me?" And he says, "No, I don't condemn you, but go and sin no more." You see, the gospel message is one that says God understands our sin nature. He understands and that's another thing, Chris. I don't know if you understand this, but just for those viewing, I want to point this out. The Christianity is the only world religion that has a theology of original sin. Judaism doesn't have it. Islam doesn't have it, right? They do a transactional understanding of, well, we're all kind of good and we do bad things, and what does one outweigh the other? Christianity says you're born with a nature that's sinful. and that you need deliverance from yourself, right? And so people often moralize sin as if smoking, drinking, cussing, whatever. But it's a nature inside of us that will destroy us, right? And everybody understands this. Every news reporter will say, well, no one's perfect, right? And we all have flaws. And so we use these kind of terms with not understanding the depth of what we're saying, right? So the gospel offers hope. Jesus comes and says, look, I forgive you because you're being controlled by a nature that is destroying you. So I forgive you for that. But now I'm going to offer you deliverance from that. I'm going to offer you a way out. And the moment the church stops preaching that, Catholic, Protestant, the moment we stop giving people hope for their future, that they don't have to be this anymore. I mean, I was on drugs for 20 years and had a destructive life, multiple relationships with multiple women, and I was an atheist. I didn't believe a bit. In fact, I kind of believed what the public school system told me. That I came from monkeys or aliens or we came from something, but in the end, I was God. And when I came across the gospel of Jesus Christ, when I came across, because I'm a cause and effect guy, a mechanical mind. And so when I saw the Bible laid out, the case that what I was struggling with was my own nature, and that God would not only forgive me for that, but by the power of his Holy Spirit, offer me the power to overcome my own nature, it was music to my ears because I was being told by the public and by the government that I had all these isms and I had all these different social disorder things going on. And the truth was, I just needed to be set free from myself. So once the church loses this message, it has no message. It just ceases to have a viable reason to exist. So in our context here, the United Church of Christ doesn't exist anymore because they've all left and became independent congregations with their kind of own structure now.
Yeah, and I think if you want to predict anything with near certainty, if you're a gambling person, uh, probably won't. A lot of these mainline Protestant denominations won't exist the next century
Yeah,
as a result of this, unless something changes.
unless
Unless
a,
something,
a revival, a great awakening.
yeah, yes, yeah, something like that. You would need to have something like that in order to do that. And I think with Gen Z, there are young men and women who are either becoming trads or trad wives, like you mentioned, who are looking for a return to tradition, a return to spirituality, a return to a rightful way, a righteous way to position themselves in the world
Yes.
in relation to their family, their community, their society, the nation, everything like that. They're
Mm-hmm.
looking for that. But yeah, I don't know it in those congregations. If they can't find it there, they're going to wither away.
Well, I think the Catholic, and you were noting this earlier, and you were onto something. You're onto something so powerful that the FBI was coming against it. And
Mm.
that was the Jesuit movement is rising up again. And there's this young men in the Catholic tradition are seeking a much more conservative spiritual path and journey, right? And
Mhm.
the FBI noticed it and created a task force to investigate it and come against it because it was creating potential,
They called
what would they
them
call them, domestic terrorists.
Yes, they called them radical traditionalist Catholics. That was a memo
Ah,
that was released, and they were investigating these radical Catholics and seeing what they're up to.
that's
Speaking
insane,
in
my
Latin,
friend.
doing all. I know it's scary stuff when you think about we got a lot of problems in this country. I mean, you're aware of that. We have drugs coming over the border. We have
Yeah.
human trafficking numbers insane. People in everyone's town. There are people being human trafficked. Can you believe that? They're
Yes.
investigating people in mass on Sunday who are speaking Latin. It doesn't make sense to your casual observer, does it? But no,
No.
it's they're finding issue with it, and there's a political thing there. There's a political element because a lot of these people who are in these traditional Christian groups, they're politically involved. You
Right.
know, they don't just a lot of them, when I speak to them, it's not that they just they have a faith and they live very privately. It's they want to change something. They're very animated. They want to do something about what's happening, and
Absolutely.
it's
Absolutely.
drawing the
Yeah.
attention of government, without a
Well,
doubt.
it's not that they want to do something; they are doing something.
Yes, they're
So,
very effective too. Yes, yes,
yes,
they're
very
setting
effective.
up organization. Yeah.
And on some basic numbers here, I mean, when you just simply look at, I think it's something like 90% of the hospitals in America, when they started out as Christian organizations that were trying to do good in their community. 90% of food banks,
Yeah,
90% of orphanages,
yeah,
on and on and on. So Christian groups like that don't just want to do something, they
mhm.
literally change society.
Yeah, 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 exactly. And it's not only happening in Roman Catholic groups. You're seeing like certain Protestant denominations, like you have the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod.
Hmm.
They have a lot of young men increasing in attendance because they're more of a conservative faction of evangelical Lutheranism. You also
Yes,
see Orthodox Christians, Orthodox churches. There's a,
sure.
a interesting documentary out there about the Orthodox revival in the South, in southern states in the U.S., where
Right.
Orthodox Church in America, Russian Orthodox Church, Greek Orthodox Church, all these different Orthodox churches. They're seeing people who don't even belong to the ethnic group just joining these these
Right.
these ethnic churches because the
Yeah.
theology that they're selling and the vision they're selling for people's lives, it speaks to them. Yeah,
Right.
it's so antithetical because they are more traditional. It's so antithetical to what they're being sold elsewhere that they're drawn to it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, so
Yeah,
isn't there always this kind of second law of thermodynamics for every action? You see what I'm saying?
yeah, yeah.
So
Reaction.
these young
Yeah.
men are literally going rushing to the exact opposite
Yes.
direction.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, and I think the more you popularize some of the more radical things, like females, formerly men competing in women's sports, the ability that there are
God
infinite
help us.
genders, all of these different ideas and theories that are very novel and haven't stood the test of time. And have historically, actually, if you look at the fall of Rome, maybe you can make some comparisons, but
Right.
they don't really
Right.
work. But 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 they lead to reaction. They're
Yes.
pushing people away. It is nominally open, affirming, but actually it's causing people to leave, to run
Right.
away from it,
Yeah.
because it's also accusing. It's not just, oh, we're taking every win. It's accusing everyone else
Hmm.
of being wicked and
Yeah.
and and being destructive, enemies of the people.
Sure. So back to the religious analogy, what every group like that does is they have to have ways of declaring who's saved and who's not saved, right?
Mhm.
And who's righteous and who's unrighteous, who's going to heaven, who's going to hell. And so you have to create these litmus tests. You have to decide who's in and who's out. And this is why the Democratic Party is imploding because they basically became a perverted form of evangelical church, right? Where they excluded everyone that could not recite their mantras and who could not affirm their belief systems. And as a political party, that's not a viable strategy, right?
Well,
It might work.
eventually you run out of oppressors
Yeah,
and people to
is that
accuse, and you
right?
turn on yourself, and then the great purges start.
Yes.
And
Yes.
everyone is suspect.
Yep.
Everyone is suspect. Anyone
Yeah.
could be an enemy with it,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. You start
So
putting people on the rack. You start putting, yeah,
yes,
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
yeah, yeah,
yeah.
yeah. But that happens in real terms, and that happens in. I think one of the most radical things that a young man or woman can do in my generation is to be a centrist.
Yes.
If you do not have a firm belief, either right or left, where you're starting to see these communities form, these different
Hmm.
axes. You have these far left groups, and you have these far further to the right groups, right?
Hmm.
If you're in the middle and you're just like, hey, I want to be able to afford a house, I want to have a family, I want to do something like that,
Right.
and you're not very politically involved on social media, if you don't make the Black Lives Matter post, if you don't make the Gaza protest post, if you don't make all of these different
Right.
gestures towards having a political belief, you'll find yourself communityless and you'll become a target.
Yes.
And people will go after you like you haven't seen before, because silence
Exactly.
is violence in my generation.
But
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, you guys, wow. So and I'm thinking all the way back to Occupy Wall Street, right? And
Hmm.
comparing that to the Tea Party movement. and one was burning cities and leaving trash everywhere, and the other one was cleaning the trash up and reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. It was such a weird juxtaposition, right? But
Yeah.
you make a good
What
point
what we're
because
going to see the rise is, I think, is the rise of things that are going to be universally hated. If you look at where trends are going right now, is popularism. Uh,
yes.
anything, they call it populism, but really anything that's popular among people, if you can codify that and put that into a person, which I
Mhm.
think President Trump is trying to do. If you
Yes,
listen to certain people around him, his communications people, if you see the relationship between Steve Bannon and his ideology,
for
if you
sure.
look at that stuff, that it's becoming very dangerous, and that's, I
Hmm.
think, also taking away a lot of people from the left and from traditionally blue collar Democrats. They're going for that stuff. They're having someone
Absolutely.
speak to them, and
Yeah.
that's very, very scary for people in the Democratic Party who have
You better
traditionally
believe it.
relied on these people. Yeah,
They're
yeah,
imploding like those denominations. They're imploding. But
yes,
Trump is playing the Pareto principle, the 80
hmm,
20 rule, right?
yes,
He simply went after all the political positions that for decades, 80% of Americans said, we want this.
hmm,
And he just said, all right, I'm going to offer it to them. I guess we'll call it populism. But
yeah.
it was just things that were tracking for decades that the majority of Americans, the center of America said, we think this is common sense and we want this, right? And he just nailed it. He went for it.
Yeah, yeah. And that's why when you see the pushback on certain things, like I always find it funny. We did a segment on an NTD show called Prime Time where we were looking at what Elon Musk and Doge is currently doing.
Okay.
And you see these headlines like, oh yeah, we just took away 18 millions to teach Sri Lankan journalists how to use non-binary gendered language. Uh, and then you see a representative from Democratic Party, an elected official, go out and start screeching about it. I mean, it's not helping. I mean,
No.
the people are against that stuff. The majority of people. This is not like
Right.
an 80-20. This is like a 99-1 type issue. Uh, so, so,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
causing a lot of conversions right
Well,
now. If you
every
look,
Republican strategist I've seen that says all we need is for the Democratic Party to keep doing what they're doing,
what they're
right?
doing, yeah,
Yeah.
that's what. If you look at Senator Kennedy, that's what he's talking about. He says it's not good for. Recently, Senator Kennedy from Louisiana, he gave an interview on Fox, and he was talking about how right now the Democratic Party is about as popular as chlamydia, um, and that was the
Kennedy
quote.
has a
But
way with words.
yes, yes, he's a very interesting guy. Interesting guy. But yeah, if you look at approval, I think it was 27% of people that were polled by NBC
Hmm.
view the Democratic Party favorably.
Right.
27%.
CNN's was 21%.
Yeah, very scary.
Yeah, very
Very scary
scary.
stuff. So it's
Yeah, but it
yeah,
means they have to remake
it's waking.
themselves.
Yeah, it's waking people in the Democratic Party up that there
Yeah.
is an issue, and they're not responding to it well. That's why I think you're seeing what's going on with Schumer right now and the no confidence
Hmm.
thing. It's
Right.
all a reaction to that. They're kind of no, not many people know who the leader is of the Democratic Party right now
They don't
because
have one.
they had propped up Kamala Harris for a little bit. They were
Right.
riding on the coattails of Joe Biden. Now they have Senator Schumer, who's a Senate Minority Leader.
Hmm.
He's supposed to be the leader, but he made the vote to pass the CR, so people are turning against him. Uh,
Right.
a lot of people in the poll recently are saying it's AOC,
Yeah.
so we'll see.
I'd say most observers though believe that the Biden administration was simply the third administration of Obama, right? That it was
President
all
Obama.
his people running the show. Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard that. I've also heard that there were Biden people and Obama people getting into constant feuds uh, over the
Yeah, I've heard
direction of the
that. Yeah.
country.
Yeah.
I don't know how involved President Biden was in policy making and the executive orders that he auto penned. I don't really
Hmm.
know, what his level of involvement was or his level of
Right.
understanding. There's that famous interaction with him and Mike Johnson where he's talking about an argument over whether or not he did something. like whether or not
Hmm.
he signed an executive order that he couldn't
Right.
recall that he actually did. And the
Yeah.
extent, you think about the extent of knowledge of what he knows that he did, and his mental state, it's very concerning. But yeah, they're right now ideologically, they're in an interesting position. They're kind of leaderless. And if you listen to Senator Kennedy, if they continue doing that, they're going to lose pretty bad in the primaries.
Sure. Yeah. So
Yeah,
you said something a few minutes ago that I think I want to come back and zero
during
on because it was
midterms.
very important. You talked about your generation being centrist, right? And I would posit that a genuine Christian in the evangelical world, we'd say a born again believer, they can't be or either right or left because Christ commands us to care for the poor, right? He commands us to do many things that would be considered liberal. Then he commands us to live in such a way that can only be considered conservative. And so anybody following that path, anybody walking down that path, they're going to be a centrist to some degree. They're not going to be able to fully embrace
There's no real
any
party
one
that
party.
speaks to that.
No,
Yeah,
no.
yeah. Because traditionally, and this is before Trump, I mean, you saw the Republican Party being much closer to the Libertarian Party in the sense of
Yes.
economics. There was a lot of far further to the right economic theories. And then when you have President Trump, you see a rise in protectionism, and you no longer have free trade and that sort of thing. You have fair trade. The only party I think in America that speaks to that is probably the American Solidarity Party, which probably polls at
Ah.
0.02%. There
Mm.
really isn't, like what you're describing. What you're describing is distributism,
Yeah.
basically. That's another type. There's capitalism. There's communism. And then there's also distributism, which is kind of a Christian view of economics and society, where you
Mm.
have kind of right-leaning social views. You
Hmm.
you believe in marriage as a man and a woman. You believe in in two genders. All of these radical ideas of the
Right.
in this day and age. And then you also believe in stuff like welfare, or taking care of the poor and that sort of thing.
Sure.
So that's kind of packaged into that system.
Yeah. A genuine
And
social safety net. Yeah.
yes, yeah, yeah. But that hasn't been so popular. That party hasn't been so popular. They haven't been able to get there. So the Republicans are kind of picking up where they left off. It seems that the
Hmm.
Republicans are becoming more distributist. But we'll
Sure.
see what happens with their work on Social Security. Let's see what happens.
Now, where does this new free cons? I've been watching this group,
Mhm.
the Freedom Conservatives versus the
Yes.
America First Conservatives. So how do you see them falling on this spectrum?
Well, I mean, this I think it goes back to protectionism as well. I mean, the
Mm.
way that politics in the United States works is you have people with money, and they make determinations, and then the
Yes.
politicians go follow suit. I mean, this isn't radical. You have a series of donors. They meet at events. They pledge a certain amount of money, and policy is crafted.
Right.
You have certain people with money in this country that are pretty quick to change allegiances too, to get something that they want done. So all of these
Yes.
political factions, I think, come as a result of different constellations of power and
Hmm.
wealth trying to go after their goals. That's demonstrated by people like Mark Zuckerberg, for
Hmm.
example, CEO of Meta, where you have him being a lifelong Democrat who is now getting very cozy with the Trump administration,
Hmm.
because perhaps for reasons of the preservation of his fortune, and also the work of the company.
Absolutely.
So I think you're going to see a lot of people become more malleable with Trump. The reason is, like I mentioned, traditionally there's donors, they make determinations, politicians follow suit. Trump is doing something pretty radical here, and people from all sides have observed this, that he doesn't really give them much thought anymore. He's just doing what his agenda is, and
Right.
they can join or die, kind of. He can be a very
Wow. Yeah.
good
Yeah. I
threat.
like that. I like that. Join or die. This
Yeah,
is the
you
French
can be
for
a very
religion,
good
baby.
He can be a very good friend to people with wealth. You see that with
Yes,
Elon Musk, for example. He'll even sell his cars on the front lawn of the White House if he cooperates well.
absolutely.
But if he can also be a very harsh critic, and we
Mm,
saw that during his first term. I mean, people go against him, he hits back, and he does it double the amount that they dished out initially. So I think politics in America is changing. This is scaring the elite with a lot of money and power and influence. They don't really know what to do. So it's hard to really speak on and give my appraisal of where those certain movements are going to end up. But there's always going to be players out there pooling money, trying to influence people. And I just think we're living in a very interesting little epoch here where you have 4 years of somebody that doesn't really give them the time of day and is
right.
pushing through his own thing. I think this is just very radical. It goes without saying that this is something that people need to pay attention to. Whatever
For
he's
sure.
doing, it really does seem like he's doing it,
But
which
you
is
know,
usually
you
not the case.
now look, there's a whole nother level to this. You're 100% on. But our foreign policy has been led by the CIA. That Schlesinger memo that finally got unredacted.
Mhm.
That's
Mhm.
amazing, right?
Yeah.
That all the way back to 62,
Mhm.
we understood that the president was not leading foreign policy. There was this legion that
Yeah.
said, we don't care who's in the White House, we're going to run the world the way we think it's right for a hegemony and empire.
Yes.
Trump
Yeah.
is an absolute danger to that the whole scheme.
Yeah. And historically, you see what happens when presidents say certain things like
They
that.
get a bullet through their ear.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's what some argue happened to JFK. We're finding out more with the files uh,
Yeah,
every day. They keep doing more dumps and that we're getting a lot of information out there. But yeah, so the world order previously, you go back 20 years, you can say this is the world order. You have the United States as a global super dominant hegemon,
hmm,
um, with total control really and influence over the world, and a lot of that foreign policy is being directed by the three-letter agencies,
right.
different intelligence agencies, working together, doing certain things with the consent of the president, perhaps not with the full knowledge of the president.
Right.
That's just kind of how we operated. Um, Now we're seeing something that a Russian philosopher of international relations, Alexander Dugin, talks about, where we're going to a multipolar world.
Hmm.
We had a unipolar previously where the US was just at the top, they were controlling things. Now we're looking at other groups like China, India, Russia, all of these nations competing on the world stage, vying for power, controlling different constellations of power around geographic regions. We have our own sphere of influence. They have their sphere of influence.
That's right.
And we're kind of going to work with each other in our own national interests. So we're going more towards that. And
Mhm.
this is new territory too. This
New.
and this is very new because we had a good run after World War II for quite a while,
Hmm.
being the global superpower. But I think
We
Trump
were it.
recognizes, yeah, Trump recognizes that economically we kind of sold ourselves out a bit there, and we allowed other countries to climb to heights they had never achieved before, and now we have to share the world with them.
Yeah. Yeah. Good
Yeah,
analysis. Good
yeah,
analysis.
yeah,
Man, Chris, this has been good. I love it. I love it. We've covered a
yeah,
lot of territory here. Um, but I want to end on a high note for Gen Z. Um, so, guys, I'm going to leave a link in the description. Y'all need to check out Chris's interview there on NTD. Uh, you're going to love it. All right, Chris, I want you to talk to 15-year-old Chris. And 10 years ago, this young man that doesn't know what he's going to be, doesn't know what he's going to do, all those out there now, those 15, 16-year-olds, um, let them know that it's going to be okay. T- tell them that uh, that whatever's going on politically in the world, that God's got a plan for their life.
Yeah. Well, the best message I can give is get close with your family. Love your parents. Give them your time. Spend time with your grandparents if they're still around. Focus on your immediate family. Focus on your friends. Uh, Pursue something that aligns with the values that you have. You don't need to look to Andrew Tate or any of these other influencers out there that are gripping the minds of Gen Alpha and Gen Z. You can be really, really fulfilled spiritually, psychologically, if you just do what makes you happy, and you can bring happiness to those immediately around you. So just focus on that. That's what I would say to myself.
Wow. Wow. Awesome. Because that was the exact opposite message you received in college.
Yeah.
Reject all that you learned at home
Reject your
and let us
family.
remake you. Yes.
Let us remake you. Actually
Wow.
get closer.
Wow. Great, great message. Chris, thank you so much. I know that we're going to do this again because it's been rich. It's been good. I appreciate your time. Thank you everybody for joining us today for Straight to the Heart with Eric Earhart, and we'll catch you next time.